I am here with Aaron and Cindy today to do our law school admissions masterclass. Very excited to dig in. We've got a couple hundred people on the webinar, so it should be great and lively and interactive. We are here today to cover tips and tricks for law school admissions, but we also want this to be as helpful and informative as it possibly can for our audience. And the best way to do that is don't be shy. Chat in your questions. We are here to answer them. We'll keep the conversation and the dialogue going. And I'm gonna tee this up with some questions to get started. I see everybody saying hi and hello, thank you. I should tell you there are also some of our wonderful team members from Blueprint who will be manning the chat today. Stephanie, Phoebe, and Heather are all here. So they will help answer your questions, give you advice and guidance on all of that stuff. Here's what I'd like to ask, just to tee things up. And this is, of course, our topic for conversation this evening. I want everybody to go over to chat. Change your chat to panelists and attendees so that everyone can see what's going on in the chat over there. And what I would ask everyone is, before we jump in, I'm sure everyone has some hopes and dreams related to their future law school plans. I want to hear, what is your number one target law school? Okay, now pretend there are no barriers in your way, no hurdles. If you could tee it up right now, where is it? Whoa, look at that list. I got a UConn, Austin, whoa, a Berkeley, a UCLA, my alma mater. Look at that. Wow.
Great list.
Are you guys, Aaron and Cindy, you getting all these down?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is moving. Look at that. Okay. All right. I have one more question for you. This one won't get people as excited. Tell me, where are you in your LSAT plans? I want to make sure that we moderate the content for people who have taken the test or haven't taken it yet, or they might be a year out or in their middle of putting their apps together. I see some beginning, just took it, the June test over the weekend, the last of the Flex exams, studying for October, final countdown for August. Nice. Okay, that Great. Is what I like to see. So we have a nice mix of students. Love to see it. Okay. First things first, let me introduce myself. I will be your host for this evening. My name is Matt Riley. I co-founded Blueprint Test Preparation back in 2005, fresh out of undergrad. So I have been running this place for about 17 years, almost 17 years now. I taught thousands and thousands and thousands of pre-law students over the years, also helped them get together applications and work their way through the admissions process. So I am very excited to be here. I have seen all there is to see related to the LSAT and law school over the years. Okay, so the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'll focus mostly on the good stuff today. I'd like to introduce, before we start the presentation, I'd love to introduce my co-host for the evening. Aaron, why don't you go first? Give the group a little bit about your background.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Aaron. I'm really excited to be on the webinar and get to know some new students as well. I just graduated from law school. I went to Harvard Law School and Harvard College, and I was a Blueprint student myself. And so for the past 5 years, I've been working with students applying to law school, both studying for the LSAT and preparing for admissions. So helping through essay ideas, preparing for interviews, making school lists. This has kind of been my bread and butter for a while now. And I like to think that I can help students by letting them also know what it's like to be an applicant and a student and a recent law school graduate. So looking forward to chatting today and hope to meet some of you in the future.
That's great. Thank you, Aaron. And I love Aaron's perspective. He's quite a bit younger than yours truly, if you can't tell. So he is very freshly through the process and has a lot of recent experience working for students. Now, the other perspective we have here, very valuable. Cindy is going to give us some secrets from behind the scenes. So Cindy, say hello, and would you tell everybody a little bit about your background?
Hello, everyone. Welcome tonight. My name is Cindy Oliva, and I actually currently working with University of San Francisco School of Law. I am part of the admissions committee with them. I'm the assistant director of admissions, And here to basically help you all with the application process. I review up to going on 800 applications as of today. So I'm here to answer any of your questions in regards to the admissions process for law school and the application overall.
Excellent. Thank you, Cindy. 800 applications per year. It's a lot. It's a lot to get through. So you will have a great perspective on what makes an application stand out among the crowd. So let's dig in. So we put together some slides in the presentation, but like I said, feel free at any point. We also had some students submit questions over social media before the webinar. So I have those worked into the outline. And what we will do is go through our slides and feel free to chat in questions at any point. So here we go. Everybody. So we are gathered here today for the Law School Admissions Masterclass. Now, what we're going to do is we only have about 90 minutes, but what we're going to try and do is do a nice overview of the process and then dig into all the important pieces of your application and how to, of course, stand out among the crowd of applicants. So meet Blueprints, Law School Admissions Consultants. We have a team of consultants who are all excellent, but tonight, I'm very excited to dig in with Aaron and Cindy, who are two of our best. We're going to talk a little bit about Blueprint and our brand new refreshed law school admissions services, if anybody's interested with additional help. Then we have our whole Law School Admissions 101, and at the end, of course, some open Q&A. So let's jump in. So here are the headshots, but of course, we already did our bios. So I'll move past it. Aaron and Cindy, thank you again for being with us this evening. Now, I did want to give a quick plug. If you leave today with questions and you would like additional assistance getting that law school application together, Blueprint does offer best-in-class services, everything from help with your personal statement to comprehensive services, building your school list, working with timelines, going through letters of recommendation and everything else. So make sure to check out the website. Our student success team is really awesome. So if you have any questions, just chat in, call in, and they can help make sure that you have the right solution for your personalized situation. Now, I did want to take 2 seconds and deal with one pressing issue before we jump into our contents. And that is, I wanted to take a few minutes and address rumors and things that you might have heard about the last law school admissions cycle. So there are people, and we're still a little bit in the middle of it. We still have a lot of students who are negotiating wait lists, last minute acceptances and things like that. But for the 2020-2021 law school admissions cycle, it was a little bit unexpected. And it was a competitive cycle, a little bit more competitive than past years have been. Now, just to tell you a little bit about kind of the details and all the moving pieces there, I did a webinar that was an hour long on all the factors that led up to the competitiveness of the cycle. So if you want to look at that, trust me, I have way too much to say about it, but I'll give you the headlines right now, which is it did turn out to be a really competitive cycle. Applicants, the number of people applying to law school was up about 20%, but even more, what made it even more competitive than that is applicants with high scores were up even more than 20%. At the top of the cycle, we saw increases 70, 80, even 100%. So the good news is most of the people on this webinar are not dealing with that cycle, and you're looking forward to the fall of 2022, which is good news. But there is a good chance that we will again have a competitive cycle. We don't have some of the unique factors that we had last year, like, of course, the pandemic, the shortened test, taking it home for the first time. So I think it will even out a little bit. But all that means is we have to make sure that when your application arrives at your dream law school, you have to make sure that all of the pieces are top notch, right? That you've really put together a full and complete, excellent application so they understand you as a candidate. I'd love a little, Cindy, can you give us a little bit, insiders, somebody who lived through that? Were you guys surprised by the increase in applicants this cycle?
We were actually, due to the pandemic, we sort of expected it to either be the same as last year or even less, just because of, we initially did receive some inquiries in regards to the pandemic. And some students were scared to take the leap and didn't want to take classes online. But it was sort of a turnaround, and we did see an increase of 30% in our application pool. And that did increase our median scores, which I'm assuming we'll get into it later, but that increased our median scores by, I would say, 2 to 3 points in regards to GPA and LSAT.
Yeah, and that's a big change, right, in terms of overall LSAT performance. And what about you, Aaron? Working with students, did you hear anything? How did this change the psychology of a student going through the process?
Yeah, I think a lot of people decided now would be a good time to apply because maybe the pandemic put other things on hold. And so you can say I can make a life transition. And yeah, the news of the higher scores definitely stressed out a lot of my students. But what I always say to people is, don't lose sleep over things you can't control. And so who knows what the broader trends will be next fall? Who knows who else is going to be taking the LSAT and how they're going to do on it. What you can control is how you do on the test, how much you study, and how you put yourself across in your applications to these law schools. And so that's what you should focus on going forward, and don't spend too much time worrying about kind of these broader national trends and number changes, because at the end of the day, you have no control over it.
Yeah, definitely. I would say the same thing, right? Take the general advice, which is you need to have the best application that you possibly can. But other than that, what everyone else is doing, don't spend too much time thinking about it. Cindy, we're getting a couple questions from people asking about kind of where you guys are in the cycle. Is your class complete for the fall, or are you still managing wait lists and things like that?
So we're still accepting applications. Usually, some schools within California will accept applications up until even the week before orientation. I know there are some schools like UC Hastings that has closed off their application entirely and are only accepting waitlisted or are waitlisting their students right now. So some schools have closed off their application. My advice is always, apply earlier rather than later, just because at this time of the application cycle, it's a lot more competitive.
Yes, we will get to that in a second. It's not advised to apply at this point in the cycle, definitely. Okay, great. And what I would say, and just last point I want to make on the last year's cycle is this. I think sometimes students don't give admissions committees enough credit for being in the know with everything that's happening in the world of the LSAT and law school admissions. One of the things that you will hear is that there was some score inflation last year, shorter tests, you take it at home. People did a little bit better on the LSAT, but admissions committees are aware of that, and they will correct things, stabilize, equate things for different cycles. So again, same theme. Do your best, study for the LSAT, get your best application together, get it in early and maximize your chances. Now, let's dig into each of those points in detail. Okay, so let's talk application. So here, what we have is a general overview of how you apply to law school. Now, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because, believe it or not, it's not incredibly complicated. It's not like an overwhelming, terrible process to figure out. Now, this comes from me who, when I started doing this, people were still mailing in their applications to law school. So it's gotten a lot better. You can upload things and they submit it for you. It's really crazy. What I want to point you to is those 3 letters down at the bottom, which say CAS. That is the Credential Assembly Service. LSAC, who you are probably familiar with. So LSAC is the Law School Admissions Council. If you're very new in this process, go check out lsac.org. You establish an account there. That's how you register for the LSAT. That's where you submit and upload nearly all of your application materials. They also offer a service called the Credential Assembly Service. We'll talk about it a little bit at the end of the webinar, but my general advice is it's worth the investment because they organize all of the application materials for you. So then you can go on and select the schools that you want to apply to. They will tell you what materials you need. You upload everything there. You take your LSAT, you send them your transcripts, all that good stuff. And then when everything's ready, you just hit submit and everything goes off to your law schools. The only thing that, of course, goes around you to some extent are your letters of recommendation, and those are sent directly to LSAC by your recommenders. But nothing too terrible. Sign up for LSAC. They have a pretty good walkthrough of everything there. Now, I did want to, we got one question on social that I thought was a good one to discuss quickly. Aaron, from a student, we got a question that was, how do you build a school list? And I know that's sometimes a complicated question, but students who are early in the process, what would you tell them when they start to whittle down their list of target schools to which they want to apply?
Yeah, I think there's a number of factors that you want to look into. The first is just your personal life. Do you want to live on the West Coast? Do you want to live on the East Coast? Do you want to, practice in California for your career? So you first need to answer some questions about what type of post-law school experience you want and what type of personal life you want to have in law school. Do you want to live in the cold? Do you want to live in the hot? The second thing is to think about kind of your chances of getting in everywhere. I mean, maybe you have an idea, maybe you haven't taken the LSAT yet, but you know your GPA, you know kind of where you think you're going to be in the LSAT or where you hope you want to be. And then you can check, every school shows whether you're in the kind of the 25% or the 75%. If you're somewhere in between the 25 and 75 with your numbers, or even above, obviously, you have a decent shot of getting into those schools. So you create, anywhere from 6 to some people apply to like 12 law schools, and you look where you have a good shot of getting in, make a decent number that you think you have a good shot, maybe some reaches, right? Things that maybe I'll not get in, maybe I won't, but I want to try. And then some, if you really want to go to law school no matter what in the fall of 2022, then you say, okay, well, these schools, my numbers are such that I feel really good about getting in there. And then you put it together, and you can certainly email schools and ask, can I talk to a student, or can you send me some information about yourself? You can do a lot of research too and figure out where you want to be, because at the end of the day, law school is very hard, and that's a fact. And you want to make sure that you're somewhere where you can thrive personally so that you can do the best academically. So just think about what you're looking for in the next 3 years, check out your numbers, and obviously talking to someone is also good too.
Yeah, all good advice. And I would echo that. The big headline that I tell the students all the time is put down the US News rankings, please. And I know students who have moved halfway across the country to go to a school that's ranked one slot higher in the US world rankings. And then, of course, 6 months in, they're trying to transfer back to somewhere where they want to live or closer to family and things like that. Prioritize how you're going to do at the school, not just the ranking of the school, because how you do once you're in law school is much more important to your future career prospects than what the ranking of the school is in the first place. And I also want to just put something else on your radar, which is think about scholarship money as well. A lot of schools are offering aggressive scholarships to students who have good applications, and that can make a big difference. So it opens a lot of doors to not rack up as much debt when you're in law school. Really gives you a lot of freedom in your future career. So you really have to take all those factors into consideration. Cindy, anything to add? People early in the process when they're thinking about schools?
Yeah, I guess the only thing that I would also add to that would be researching the different programs that law schools offer. So, all the law schools in the United States offer law clinic opportunities and externship opportunities, but each law school has unique sort of law clinic that might resonate a lot more with you versus the other. And all of that information is available on the website, on websites. So look at that, look at the law clinics, externships, academic services that the law schools may offer. I would even look at mentorship programs that law schools have. Some schools have peer-to-peer mentorship programs as well as an alumni mentorship program. So definitely resources that different law schools may offer. Some offer some, and all of that information is available on each and every school's website. So definitely do your due diligence in regards to researching the programs that each law school has.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, good advice. And you can find that stuff online. You can visit law schools. A lot of them, they are more than willing to give you lots of information because they want to brag about all the special programs that they have. A couple questions in the chat I just want to deal with. I knew there was going to be a lot of LSAT questions. Trust me, I have a lot to say about the LSAT, but I want to deal with a few of these quickly. Layla asked, is it worth taking the LSAT when you're still not 100% prepared, given the new Lsat Score preview? My answer is no. Wait until you're ready to take the test because you want to maximize your score. The score preview is a great tool if you have a bad day, but it in no way should incentivize you to take the test if you're not ready. What advice do you have for someone who might move to another state later down the line after passing the bar? And I would say that goes in line with Aaron's advice, right? A lot of people underestimate how much where you go to law school influences where you will get a job, because you just naturally form a network of people in that area. So don't think of it as 3 years and then you can go anywhere in the country. Think of it as 3 years and I'm really starting to build a life and build a network here. There's always flexibility, but there will be a lot of inertia to set up your life wherever you go to law school. All right, let's keep moving. We ready? So that's the application overview. Next, let's talk timeline. It is, what are we in? June? It's almost summertime. So a lot of people are thinking ahead months in the future to say, well, when should I apply to law school? Now, here's how I want to approach this. I'm going to state one thing that I think is not controversial, and that is it's always better to apply early, right? The earlier, the better. Now, that part's easy. What I want to do is I want to talk about why that's the case. I want to try to quantify how important it actually is. And then let's give some tips to people for how they should deal with that, some pitfalls that they can avoid. So Cindy, can you talk to me a little bit about why it's important to apply early in the first place?
Yeah, so usually when applications come out in September, that's when admissions committees have the opportunity to provide admit offers or applicants with full admissions offers as well as scholarship money. I would say around mid-September to December would be the ideal time to submit your application. A lot of folks believe that they hold on to their application due to a pending LSAT score that they may take in the future or retake in the future. There's no need to actually hold on to your application if all you're waiting for is an LSAT score. You can actually, schools will allow you to submit your application, and that will provide you with the opportunity for the school to date and stamp your application. And then by the time that they do receive a complete application from you, then they'll go ahead and pick up your application according to the date that it was submitted. So the earlier the better it is for you to receive full admission and scholarship consideration for the school that you're applying to.
Yeah, and that's a really good tip. And that was, we just got a question saying, can I apply in October if I'm taking the October test? You can send everything in. And then as soon as the LSAT score arrives, you will be on that admissions desk. That's great. Okay, Aaron, passing over to you. Let's talk. So I know this, I hate to say this out loud, everyone, but it is true. Sometimes people procrastinate. Sometimes you make a plan and you just don't follow it. And I want to, let me just, before I kick it to you, Aaron, I want to say one thing. This slide here, you see those green boxes that we have where it's like get letters of recommendation through April and then write personal statement over the summer and send transcripts in August and September. I guarantee you we have a lot of people on this webinar who are now freaking out and saying, oh my gosh, I'm behind already. I want to characterize those green boxes as that's like ideal state. Okay. So if you're not there, it's okay. That's the eat broccoli and kale and exercise 6 days a week plan. Okay. Sounds great. No one actually does that. Okay. So let's talk real life stuff here. Aaron, talk to me about pitfalls. When you have seen students who end up applying late, what are the things that tend to push their applications?
Yeah, you mean how to avoid pushing your application late?
Best practices for actually getting it in early.
Right, best practices if you really want to get in early. And I'll start by saying if you're going to send it in right on September 1st, it better be a good application. Because on their end, right, if they read something and it's full of typos and you can tell that the letters of recommendation were rushed, they're like, well, what was this person thinking? They had another few months to even get this in. They send this to us right away. So make sure it's going to be a clean, well-written, good letter application if you're going to get in early. And the things that tend to push your kind of date later on is waiting for those letters of recommendation. So the sooner the better, right? If you have someone in mind and you're trying to apply for the fall and you know that that person's going to be your person, just send the email. Just set up the meeting. We'll talk about that later in the webinar, but the sooner the better for asking those letters of rec. And it's a nice thing to do, right? They're doing you a favor. You want to give them as much time. And then in terms of the personal statement, yeah, start brainstorming early on in the process. And it does take time, right? It takes time. We'll talk about personal statement topics as well, but just know that this stuff can't be rushed. You can't sit down one night and just say, okay, well, I've got 12 hours and a bunch of Monster energy drinks. I'm going to crank out my personal statement. I just don't think that's how writing good essays works. And you need to be aware of that. But mostly don't get so into sending it in on day one that you put in a unpolished application, because I just think that reflects kind of bad timing and bad judgment about sending it in so soon.
Yeah, definitely. It's a good point. We got one question, Cindy, on social before the webinar, and it was, if I can't apply early and can only apply between January and March, should I still apply?
Yes. Feel free to still submit your application. Just know that, I would say anywhere from April and then on, it may be a little bit more competitive. For the most part, law schools have a first priority deadline of April. In April. So apologies. I meant the first deposit deadline is in April. So that means that a lot of the bulk of the admissions decisions do go out before April, and around April time, that's when law schools tend to see how many of their admit offers to students have been accepted. So just keep I would say if you're applying during that time, keep the April first deposit deadline in mind. At that moment, it may be a little bit more competitive versus earlier.
Yes, I agree with that answer. Yes, definitely. Okay, so here's what we're going to do, because I want to quantify a little bit. I already saw a few people in the chat saying, oh my gosh, all I've done is get ready for the LSAT. Am I so far behind already? Aaron already made this point, but let's say applications open in September and they run through February. Let's call it March. So call it that 6-month period. Sometimes I think an analogy is helpful here. Okay. Because what some people assume is, oh my gosh, if it's open for 6 months, maybe everybody applies in September. And if I get mine in October, I'm already going to be late. Do we actually think that that is the case? No, not even close. Now, what some people assume is, oh, it must just kind of be even, like things just trickle in evenly among those through those 6 months. That is also not the case, because people procrastinate, push things back, and everything else. I like to make the analogy. It's kind of like trying to get into like a popular club or a popular restaurant, something like that, right? If I'm going to, Aaron, I'm sure you've had this experience. If you want to go to like a popular bar or something, if you show up at 11 or 11:30, what are your chances of getting in there? Yeah, it's not happening. It's not happening, right? If you're just like a regular guy and you're not paying somebody off, you have to go there at like 8:30, right? Get a table, maybe have some dinner before people show up. You got to get in there early a little bit, right? I will say I'm dating myself a little bit. For me, I have 4 children now. So for me, this comes into play, not so much with like restaurants, but more like I got to get the hot time slot for my Gymboree class. And like, if you want that Saturday at 10 a.m. slot, you got to book that weeks in advance, man, because everybody shows up right before class and it just isn't happening. So picture applications like this. September, very few people apply, like very few. And most of those are people who kind of were thinking of it last year and they just have everything sitting there. Then October, still a trickle. November starts to tick up a little bit. December, you really start to see some applications. And then when you hit January, it goes crazy. Okay. Cindy, is that roughly the case?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. And I grabbed some stats here to quantify it for you a little bit. You will see, and this changes a little bit year to year, but it's always roughly the same pattern. Only about 25% of applicants submit their applications before December 1st. Okay. So that means 75% of people are December or later, and it's about 50-50. So that middle spot, and if you want to be right average among all the applicants, that actually doesn't occur until January 15th. So you have some time. All right. Now, I don't mean to say aim for January, still better to get it in earlier, but don't freak out if you're getting into the fall. If you want to think of some dates, November, right? If you can aim for Thanksgiving, get it in by Turkey Day, you are ahead of the crowd and you are in great shape. Okay. And then I did want to say, just echoing the pitfalls that I've seen very much with students. Number one is the LSAT. Sometimes people get ready for the LSAT, but they have to push their test dates or take it again. And as everyone knows, the LSAT is only given so often. So if you have to push a couple times, all of a sudden you're taking the LSAT in January or February, and then that really does delay your application. Or, as Aaron noted, letters of recommendation, which can sometimes take a good amount of time to turn around. Right. Okay. And I have seen a lot of people chatting in with questions about letters of recommendation. That is coming up in just a few seconds. All right. So that's our application timeline in general, right? Earlier is better, but get a good application together, even if it takes a little bit of time. Aim for November and December, and you'll still be ahead of the crowd. Right. All right. Let's move on. Okay. Now, for the next part of our webinar, what we're going to do is we're going to do a deep dive on all of the components of your application. Now, I do want to say before we jump in, we will not be talking in detail about the LSAT and the GPA and your GPA. Those are very important numbers. You either have your GPA wrapped up because you graduated or you're working on it right now. Keep on working. And the LSAT, we'll speak about it a little bit at the end, but incredibly important, right? Maximize that number, put in a lot of study time. But moving past that, we want to deal with the other parts of your application, and we'll kind of go through in order of importance, right? So the first topic, and something that deserves a lot of conversation, is the personal statement. So this is your essay. This is your essay to impress law schools, to convince them to let you in. It's your time to shine. So what we're going to do is look at what is the personal statement in terms of the purpose, and then give some tips on how to choose a topic and how to go about writing it. So very brief overview here. Here's the personal statement. It's very important, right? Admissions committees see this as a chance to move beyond the numbers, to really get to know the applicant, learn something personal about them. 2 steps to a great personal statement. 1, what's special about you, right? You want to stand out above the crowd. And 2, how does it relate to law school, right? They want to know that you want to be there. You want to be a great law student and a great lawyer. So it's a lot to accomplish in 2 pages. And we did put a little hint here that I think is important for people to know. One of the questions that I would always get from students is, well, how do I come up with something that, makes me unique or they haven't heard before? Don't put that pressure on yourself. I believe Cindy told me she's read 800 applications. I think it's going to be hard to find a story that Cindy hasn't seen before. Okay. And that's okay. Just tell it in a better way. So before we talk tips, I wanted to show people a few prompts here. You can read through them pretty quickly, but the whole point of this slide is just to show you it's incredibly open-ended. And part of this is just because there's no predefined path to law school, right? You can be a political science major, philosophy, ceramics, whatever you want to be. So they can't ask really anything about your background other than tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to pursue a career in the law, and you will see that when these come out. So let's talk tips. Cindy, I'd love to start with you. From the admissions point of view, tell me, what are admissions committees looking for in the personal statement?
I would say a personal statement that provides a well-rounded picture as to who you are as a student. I would say a personal statement that has really stood out to me has been personal statements that have basically shown a greater passion of what they're speaking about. So not necessarily, it doesn't, like how Matt said earlier, it doesn't really necessarily need to correlate to the law, the legal field, but something that you're really passionate about. And how does your passion correlate to you as a student? I had once an application come in where the student moved from Alaska, their home country, and moved to Guam. And through that experience, they found that they were passionate about running. And through their running experience, they it allowed them to move through that process. And then they correlated that particular commitment to then their studies, and that allowed them to become disciplined within their schoolwork and allowed them to become committed to their schoolwork. And so for me, that showed a lot of passion and grit. So the admissions committees likes to see that a student has a lot of grit, and they're up to surpassing any obstacles or challenges that they may experience throughout their life, and so that they can see that the student is capable enough to overcome any obstacle or challenges that life may throw at them.
Yeah, that sounds like a great story. And I do want to point out that's so the bullet point in here that says show, don't tell, what Cindy just outlined is a perfect example of that, right? You can't start out your personal statement by describing all of your great qualities, but describing a personal experience that illustrates those qualities, right? If somebody would have started a personal statement with, I have a lot of grit and I've overcome a lot of obstacles in my life, it's kind of weird, it's immodest, there's a lot going on there. But getting into the story, right, and chronicling the narrative of their life, of course, gets across those personality characteristics that you want to show in a much more powerful way. One of the things that students always struggle with is just step one, and that is picking a topic. Aaron, what advice would you give to students who are struggling a little bit and they don't quite know what they should write about?
Well, I think that what you were just saying is an important first step in choosing a topic, is understanding that you want to show, not tell, right? And what do you want to show? That's the first thing you want to think. What do you want to get across in this essay? And at the end of the day, you want to get across to these law schools that you're going to be a good law student and you're going to be a good lawyer. And so I often tell people, well, think about what makes those things, right? Hardworking, passionate, good research and writing skills, a caring person, right? These are all traits that you can want to get across in your essay. And once you think about, well, how do I want to put myself out there? And maybe if you're really high level, you're thinking, how does this maybe even play in with the rest of my application, right? How does this reflect with my letters of recommendation or with my resume? And then you start to think, and I start really broad. Think about experiences you've had over the course of your college career, or if you're out of college, think about experiences you've had at work. And I like to just do an old-fashioned brainstorm, right? Think about tasks you've done for work, people you've met, ideas that you've come into contact with that have changed your perspective or something you're very proud of. And then think, can I package this in a way that displays good qualities to the law school and either explicitly or implicitly answers those questions that they're asking? Like, has this person thought really hard about why they want to go to law school, and are they prepared to do well here? And so choosing a topic is not important insofar as, oh, if I pick the right topic, that's going to get me in. It's important insofar as you want to say, okay, this topic, maybe it's an internship, maybe it's an experience you had with a family member, maybe it's a hobby like running. But this topic I can talk about in a way that is going to display those good characteristics and show them that I've thought very clearly about why I want to go to law school and that I will do well there. So I think, start big and then narrow into, a specific experience that you think you can accomplish those goals with.
Yeah, I totally agree. And and it's a good point. The topic is incredibly important, but not because the topic itself is what's going to make a good personal statement. I keep going back to the word passion. It's something that you have to be able to write passionately about and craft a really compelling story. Like, I've read personal statements about hobbies, research projects that people have done in school, travel, like places that people have traveled that have been really inspiring personal statements. And those are the types of experiences you don't think would lend themselves to this exercise. But as long as it's something that people are like, no, this really made a difference to me, and I can relate it to why I'm pursuing this career, those are the boxes that you want to check. We're getting some great questions. I'd love you guys' help with a few of these. Here's what we got. Cindy, I'll pass this one to you. Is it okay to bring up a tragedy you've gone through to explain how it's made you who you are?
I tend to advise students, if you feel comfortable explaining your story in regards to a particular tragedy that you may have experienced, feel free to share your story. That's part of your upbringing, part of what you experienced in life. But I would also, not only, explain that particular situation, but I would also talk about how you overcame this particular obstacle, just because the admissions committee, again, would like to see the grit that you've acquired from that particular experience. How do you navigate these obstacles? How do you move through a difficult situation and still be successful in your education? So just keep that in mind. If you feel comfortable explaining that particular story, feel free to add that in your personal statement if that resonates with you. But again, also speak about how you overcame that particular obstacle.
Yeah, totally agree. And that can be a great personal statement, right? But I think the thing that it's not the tragedy itself, it's what it reveals about your own character and perseverance and those same type of qualities. And that touches on the question we got next with skills and abilities. I think we've highlighted a lot of the great ones that you want to illustrate in your personal statement. A couple questions that I'm seeing, kind of similar theme we'll get to in a second. There is a diversity statement, the addendum, the explanatory essay. Different schools have different names for it. We highly recommend you use that part of your application to explain any problems or failures or we got something about criminal activity, any things like that might come up in your application. Save that. Okay. You'll see there's a bullet point here. The personal statement is you want people to walk away inspired and really raving about your character. This is not a place to admit any weaknesses or problems. There's a separate part for that. Okay, I want to do, we have another bullet point here that I think is important, and that is find your why for law school. Now, sometimes what people think there, Aaron, is that they have to essentially explain what type of lawyer they want to be in the future. Is that the kind of specificity that you think students have to have? Or what do we mean when we say your why for law school?
I don't think you need to have that level of specificity. Some people do, and that's great, right? Maybe they worked in a DA's office after college and they're saying, okay, I work with lawyers every single day and I know that this is what they do and I know this particular job is my dream job. That's some students. That's not all students. A lot of students, I worked at Harvard. A lot of Harvard students, they don't really know what, particular type of law they want to do and all of that stuff. But you do need to make your connection between your kind of past and your present. And so when they say why law, you should be able to give some answer that says, I understand that these are some things about the legal field that fit with my skill set and my passion. I don't know exactly where I want to end up, but I know that I care about, say, these issues, and I know that I've had these experiences that have given me these skills, and I'm ready for this next chapter. You do not need to say, I would like to be a transactional lawyer in this firm and all of that stuff. That's way too specific.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I think if you have something in law that interests you, that's fine to me. If you want to be an environmental lawyer or something along those lines, that's great to mention, but don't feel the pressure to do that. Now we're getting some questions about should you write one personal statement or customize for each school? Cindy, give me a little insider's advice here. Is that something that schools expect from a student, or is it okay to kind of have one personal statement that goes out across the board?
So different schools may have specific topics on their personal statement. So it's good to just kind of do your research and figure out what the application requirements are for individual schools that you might be interested in. For the most part, there are a lot of the law schools keep it very general as to, wanting to see your skills as a student and wanting to get to know who you are as a student. So just picture yourself, sort of envision yourself already as a law student. What would that entail? And then go from there and kind of structure your personal statement in that sense.
Yeah, I think, and generally I saw some questions about pages. Most of them are 2 pages. Some schools give you a little bit extra space, but in general, it's a 2-page essay. So also not very long, right? You got to make your point and get to it reasonably quickly. I don't think personalizing it for every school is necessary. A lot of people will do the thing where at the end, they'll say, and this is why I want to attend the University of San Francisco School of Law. Schools know that you're just changing those 4 words at the end, so don't feel pressure to do that. That's not going to impress anyone. But if there is, the one thing I will say sometimes I have students who have a very specific top school for a very specific reason, right? There's a program that they really want to be involved in, or there's a specialty where the school is really highly ranked and that's something that they'd like to be a part of. That's important. And if that ties to the rest of your personal statement, that can be a great way to stand out. But definitely don't go about choosing a new topic for every school that you apply to. You'd be writing personal statements for 6 months and you'd probably go crazy in the process. So please don't feel that pressure. Okay, a couple of other things here. So find your why for law school. We talked about show your strengths, weaknesses, go into explanatory essays. And this is, I want to talk about a kind of a broader theme here. And this will be something that comes up as we go through additional parts of your application. Think of your application not as individual pieces, but as a whole that tells the story of you as an applicant, okay? There's certainly numbers attached. There's your GPA and your LSAT, right? Those are the objective measures. But you have your personal statement, you have your letters of recommendation, you might have an addendum, you have your resume. There's lots of chances to get in different messages about you as a candidate, and you want to use those in very complementary ways, right? So what Aaron said earlier is think about what you want to show. Also think about what you want to show in other parts of your application, right? Because you can get across, hey, here's a great characteristic that I want them to take out of my personal statement. Here's something I want to hit on in my letter of recommendation. Oh, and here's a few other accomplishments that I'll throw in my resume. And by the time you go through all that, you're like, wow, talk about a really solid all-around candidate. And that's what you want them to leave your application with. So personal statement, just focus on strengths, right? The positive personality characteristics that will drive you to be a good law student and a good lawyer, as we've noted. Also, this is not your resume. Focus on one topic. This is not a time to be like, I did this other thing. And then on Saturdays, I go pet sitting and all the rest of it. All of that can go in your resume. If you've done a number of great things, that's very impressive, but it makes for a really crappy personal statement because it's all over the place, okay? One topic, one theme. I know it's hard to choose, but you got to pick one because that will make for a much more colorful and powerful statement. And the last one, proofread a lot, then proofread some more. I want to give a little context on this. It's not okay to just write a good personal statement. This shouldn't just be like school quality. You know, you're turning it in and you're like, yeah, this passes the bar for an essay that I would submit to one of my professors. You should set the bar where this should be a beautifully crafted essay. And what I mean by that is, I have read personal statements from students that tell the exact same story. You read version 1 and you're falling asleep in the middle of the second paragraph. You read version 2 and it might just have a really colorful opening, like a beautifully crafted opening statement that draws you into the story. And I think about the story that you just said, Cindy, about the runner and relocating and things like that. If you start that off with boring, dry language, you lose people like that, right? But if you get into like a colorful anecdote right off the bat, that draws the reader in. And again, it gets across this idea that not only do they have a story to tell, they're a really great writer. And guess what's really important in law school? Writing. So it kind of checks a lot of the different boxes that we have there. So definitely, I would say start your personal statement early, have a bunch of people read over it, get some expert opinions from people who know this stuff, because it can be, it really does make a big difference. Any other anecdotes? I love anecdotes. Cindy, you shared one with me before. Any other topics? Give me one or two personal statements where you think students have done a really great job.
Another personal statement that sort of resonated with me has been a story of a ballet dancer where this person grew up just practicing ballet their entire life, and they applied that same discipline to their studies. So they committed themselves to not only ballet, but also committed themselves to their education, was very disciplined with not only like attendance, but participation within, their education and overall succeeding. So that same discipline was very much shown within their application, within their personal statement, how ballet had resonated with them, and they provided that transition into their schoolwork, and how they sort of just dedicated themselves within that particular study skill. So overall, just showing that you're passionate about a particular area, and then it correlating to your studies, and it, having that extra, personality where it allows us to see that it resonates to your education. Those type of personal statements do stand out when it comes to reading so many applications, because you can see how the passion sort of seeps through the application overall.
Yes, I love that example, and that it's passion, right? So someone who grew up as a ballet dancer and probably found it easy to write with a lot of spirit and energy about that particular topic. Okay, so personal statement. Those are some great tips and advice. Again, a very important part of your application. Spend some good time on it. We need to craft something really moving, right? This is your chance. Move beyond the numbers. They see your LSAT and your GPA first. They do, and there's no escaping it. But then they read your personal statement and you become a person, right? An actual live person through that essay. So that should be your goal. A couple questions. Let's see what we got here. How much do law schools care about senior year grades? It really depends on when you apply. Sometimes schools will have you send in your grades after the fact, so keep on studying. No senioritis here, please. If we haven't done any extracurriculars this past year because of COVID, will they be understanding of that? Yes, it's very hard to leave the house when there's a pandemic going on. And I see a couple questions on the resume that is coming up. So just wait a second. Okay, so moving past personal statement. Now, always a hot topic for candidates are letters of recommendation. And I find this to be one of the more intimidating parts of the process for students. And so what I'd like to do is approach it. We'll give you some tips and tricks, but I also just want to say this doesn't have to be bad. It really shouldn't be that bad. So let's approach it in this way where we have a simple recipe for putting them together. Okay, let's start with the basics. Cindy, you've seen a lot of applications. Tell me, let's start on the negative side. Tell me what a bad letter of recommendation looks like.
So I would say, well, first, when you approach someone in regards to a letter of recommendation, you tend to sort of gauge whether or not they are fully open and excited to provide you with that letter of recommendation. And maybe what would second guess having that person provide you a letter of recommendation might be someone that is hesitant in saying, yes, I will provide you that letter. I've seen some letters of recommendation that are simply 5 sentences long. And that just tells us, and the professor basically tells us, oh, you know, this student received an A in my class, and I'm sure they'll be a good law student. So, you know, just try to gauge when you're approaching a professor or a professional letter of recommendation, if they are at any point hesitant with, you know, well, it's been a while, I don't really, you know, I don't really remember you as a student. Maybe take a step back and ask someone else to provide you that letter of recommendation. I would say, you know, go for those that, you know, are more than excited to provide you, and don't hesitate at all when it comes to providing you with that letter.
Yeah, definitely. And I have heard stories from admissions committees in the past who will essentially say, you know, they will sit around and laugh sometimes because they'll look at the same letter with the same exact words for 6 different candidates during a cycle. You know, Joe was one of the best students in my class and he earned an A. I give him my highest endorsement for law school. And you're like, when you line up 6 of them, they lose a little bit of meaning. So let's take that as what you don't want. So you don't want the standard boilerplate letter. Now let's flip the script a little bit. Cindy, tell me what does a good letter of rec look like?
I would say a good letter of recommendation would include the professor. Well, first, admissions committee would like to see a letter of recommendation from an academic source. So that would either be a professor, a teaching assistant, a counselor, anyone that has witnessed your growth within a classroom, that can speak about your skills as a student. And then can also speak about maybe your participation with the class, or that maybe might have knowledge on your aspirations as someone pursuing the legal field. So I would say a good letter of recommendation is someone that is willing to speak about who you are as a student, your skills, your commitment to public interest work, you know, and so some folks may feel that they've been out of school for a while and may not have that particular connection with the professor. In that case, it would be okay to submit a letter of recommendation from a professional source. You know, those letters are still acceptable for admissions committees. We will just go back to your transcripts and kind of see when you've graduated from the university, and understand that, you know, a great letter may come from a professional versus an academic source.
And is there, Cindy, that's always a popular question. We're seeing so many people pursue law school now who have been in the workforce for a number of years. I know there's no concrete rule, but when you're looking at an applicant and they're 3, 5, 10 years out, when do you start to think it's okay not to see an academic letter?
I would sort of say if you've been out of school for the past maybe 3 or 4 years, that would be okay to submit a professional letter of recommendation. If it's 1 or 2 years, 3 years out, and it's coming and there's no academic source, professional letter, academic letter of recommendation, I would start to question why isn't, why don't we have a professor providing the letter of recommendation? But I would say, and if a student has graduated more than, I would say 3 or 4 years is sort of the cutoff, then I would understand, okay, this person has graduated a while ago and may not have those connections.
Yeah, and at that point, professional letters can be great, right? Because you should have really forged some great personal bonds with those people. Obviously, we'll have a different tone, but can still speak to your qualities as an applicant. I want to go back. So Cindy said some very important words in the beginning, which is a lot of people think that they want professors to put their grades in their letters recommended. That doesn't matter. They have your transcripts, right? They can see what grades you got. So it's got to go deeper than that. So here's our challenge. So we framed our challenge, right? We don't want the standard boilerplate letter because that does nothing, if not hurt our application. What we want is something that's a little bit more personal, tells a story. Again, in a perfect world, something that would complement our personal statement, right? Tells another interesting personality characteristic about us that will speak to the admissions committee. So, Aaron, tips and tricks. What do you tell students? How can they go about maximizing the chances that they get a good letter from their professor?
The broad advice I have is just communicate that to your professor. Remember that this is part of their job. They do this all the time. And so they're not going to be caught off guard by you asking them to write a letter of recommendation. And, if you have a relationship with them, and it might not be a professor, it might be a TA or someone who, was your seminar leader or something in college. But you should feel totally free to say, hey, I'm applying to law school. I loved your class. I turned in this paper. Can we please meet and talk about this? And then in those discussions, whether it's in person, I prefer in person. I think in person is always better. But if it happens over the phone or over Zoom, that's okay too. Say, this is why I'm applying to law school. Here is my personal statement. Here's my resume. These are the things that I'm passionate about. And then they kind of know that too and can craft a letter that's not going to seem totally out of left field with the concept, with the rest of your application. But my advice is to, once you have identified someone who is willing to write a strong letter of recommendation, and you should ask, can you write me a strong letter of recommendation to law school? Then you can work with them to make that letter strong, right? Sit down in their office, talk about the things that I just said, and just know that is, it's not a crazy ask. This is part of their job as professors and TAs at major universities. But I do think the more information that you can give them, right, and even remind them, this is the paper I wrote in your class. I loved writing this paper because blah, 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 right? The better the product that they will write is going to be.
Yeah, totally agree. Especially if you went to, I went to UCLA. I mean, I rarely took a class that had less than 400 students in it. So it was hard to form that personal bond with professors. And yet, I think Aaron raises a couple good points there. One is, don't be scared to ask, right? Just ask. They can say no. And if you say, hey, if you're too busy or you don't think you can write me a really supportive letter, just let me know and give them a way out if they're going to write that standard letter that we don't want. And then big tip number 2 is make their job easier, right? Especially if it's someone who you might have been in class. You can't blame them. You took the class 2 years ago. They're not going to remember oh man, that guy, that essay, it moved me. Okay. That's an unrealistic expectation. It's okay, but bring stuff in. Say, hey, here's my personal statement. Can you give this a read? Because I think it really talks about my candidacy and why I'll be successful in law school. And even go one step further, say, here's what would be a theme that it didn't make it in my letter, but I think it's really important. And it's why I'm committed to doing law school. I think I'll be a great law student. If you could mention something about that in the letter, that would be really helpful, and talk them through it. Start a relationship, start that bond. And I guarantee you that the end result will be so much better. Okay, now I did want to talk about, we've had some questions here about kind of who should be writing letters of recommendation. And we keep using the term professor. And it is because, look, professor is kind of the de facto letter of recommendation writer. But you will see here we have a bullet point that says it's more important for the recommender to know you well than to be well known. Cindy, how should students think about that?
So that's a great point. So definitely when it comes to a letter of recommendation, think about someone that can speak about your skills. It doesn't matter if, like, let's say you have the provost of a university, or if you have, an attorney that has a very high, well-known title. It's more so someone that really knows who you are, that holds a lot more value to your application, versus someone that may not know your skills, that is not really so much familiar as to who you are, but has a prestigious title. It's not necessarily the title that captures our attention. It's mainly more so the information that we learn in regards to who you are and what your skills are, and what you've obtained, your experiences throughout your undergrad.
Yeah, and take this seriously. Let me tell you some of the worst letters of recommendation. So going to the highest profile professor on campus who doesn't know your name and has his or her assistant, right, print out the letter of recommendation template. Maybe they misspell your name on it. That's not going to help. Here's another one that I've seen a lot. They have a family friend who's a big partner at a big law firm. That's terrible. They don't know you. They don't know how you are as a student, how you are as a worker, how you're going to be in law school. It's like, I don't know, I'm doing this as a favor for a family friend. That comes through loud and clear. Okay. You want to, it doesn't matter who it is. When I applied, I had a TA, right? I went to UCLA, huge classes, but I had a good relationship with a TA in one of those classes, and that's fine. They can write much more detailed letter about personal characteristics and traits, right? That kind of personal touch that we're really looking for there. Now, we've gotten a couple questions here. So we've talked a lot about letters of recommendation should explain why you're a good student. And law schools do care about how you will be as a law student, right? They want to know that you're going to add to the community, the classroom, the environment on campus, everything else like that. For people who have been out of school for a number of years and they are going to submit professional letters, how should they think about, Cindy, I'll give this one to you. How should they think about what you want to get across in those letters? Because clearly if it's a boss or a coworker, they can't really write about how you are as a student. So what traits would you be looking for?
I would say maybe in regards to the professional letter of recommendation, what I look for the most is time management. Does the person have time management skills? Where are they able to then manage their time well as a law student? That's how I would correlate a professional letter of recommendation, reading their skills from a professional source, and then kind of linking the two as linking them into, or picturing them, envisioning them as a law student. I would also say what I would look out for would be, does the student, even do they put themselves out there, in regards to, are they proactive? Are they hands-on, carrying on different projects? Just because in the law school setting, students participate and, they're expected to put themselves out there in a classroom setting. And so I would sort of look for those key components when it comes to a professional letter recommendation.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I think that's a similar theme, right? They want to think of the qualities that make you successful in a professional setting that will also make you successful in a law school setting, right? So time management, multitasking, energy, enthusiasm, working with your coworkers, all of those things are great. Aaron, something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, when you're thinking about who can write these letters of recommendation, whether it's a professor or a boss or a supervisor, the same principle of show, don't tell from your personal statement applies too. And so if you know that this, boss or professor can not just say that you're hardworking, but say, last quarter we had this project and, Larry came in and showed great determination by finishing this, that was a deliverable to a client and it was a huge help, right? Like those types of things apply for letters of recommendation too. And so if you know that someone has those anecdotes from your life and can use them in a letter, that's really helpful.
Yeah, totally makes sense. And that's complimentary, right? Get the complimentary pieces, have them read your personal statement and say, oh, wow, hard worker. And they read a letter of recommendation that says, brings great energy to the classroom or to the workplace. And they're starting to craft that picture of you and what you'll be like in law school. Cindy, you were going to add something?
I just wanted to mention, I did notice a question in the chat that spoke about community college letter recommendations. Feel free to submit a letter recommendation from a professor that you had a little bit more connection with from a community college. Again, that sort of goes back to the statement of the person knowing you a lot more versus having that particular title. If a professor from a community college knew you a lot better versus a four-year university or a four-year institution, feel free to submit that letter of recommendation. What I would be hesitant on receiving a letter of recommendation from is from a high school teacher or counselor, just because applying to a JD program, we sort of expect to see a letter of recommendation from more so a university setting, a four-year institution or community college setting versus a high school letter of recommendation.
Yeah, high school was a long time ago for all of us. One quick question I said in the chat too: is it better to get the other letter from a third academic person or from professional? If you can get 3 great academic letters of recommendation, go for it. So you can always add in a professional, but don't feel pressured to do that. Okay, we are going to move. There's so much great info to share, and yet we're running short on time to cover everything that we need to. So let's go to other elements of the application. So we got personal statement, we got letters of recommendation. What's next? A resume. Did you know that you were going to submit a resume when you apply to law school? Yeah, not looking for a job, but you still need a resume. Let's cover this really quickly. Cindy, give me a quick overview. What's the purpose of the resume?
So for me, when I'm reviewing applications, it's sort of a quick reference to your experience. After, reviewing your personal statement, I'm looking for any sort of leadership roles. I'm looking for any dean's list. I think I seen a question earlier in the chat that asked if you should put any dean's list information on the resume. I would add that there, and it's sort of just a quick reference to your experience. Shouldn't have too much, not so much bullet points. It's just straightforward outline of your experience within the work field.
Yeah, and especially for non-traditional students, I would say kind of giving that path, right? Where you've been since school, what you've been doing, and accomplishments, right? So things that aren't highlighted, again, everything speaking and working together, things that may not be highlighted in your personal statement or letter of recommendation, but still accomplishments that you would like that admissions committee to see. Aaron, flip side of the coin, anything that students should avoid when they're putting together their law school resume?
I would say 2 things come to mind. The first is, don't try and be creative with the format. I've seen some people give me their first resumes, and maybe they've got some big font or something. Keep it very professional. Keep it understated. And then remember, it's one page pretty much. And
two, I say two only if you've done a lot, you can go on a second page, but one should probably be enough.
I'm a big fan of the one page. I think most law schools are too. And that means you want to show them not only that, this is what I've done, but you want to show I can make one page perfect, right? At least I can do that. And so, I know it's simple. Watch out for typos, watch out for, formatting issues. And then in the actual descriptions, make sure that those kind of descriptions of your activities are very clearly written. They don't contain too many details that are going to make it feel like a run-on. This is something that someone's going to skim through. So you want to help them get through the important information, and clarity of writing is going to be very important.
Yeah, if you worked at Applebee's or something, that's fine. I worked at Applebee's for a time, but you don't need 8 bullet points on everything, all your responsibilities when you were there. Stick to the important stuff, right? Is the goal there. Yeah, I like your idea. Don't try, this is not the place to get creative. Get creative, beautiful writing in your personal statement, not in the resume. You don't need Elwood's, pink paper, perfume, none of that stuff. You don't need a gavel up in the corner to show people that you're serious about the law. None of that stuff is going to convince anybody.
I would just add, definitely not 10 pages. I did receive an application, actually had a phone call from an applicant that was asking about a 10-page resume, and that's just way too long. So just keep it plain and simple. 1 to 2 pages should suffice. And not all schools require the resume, so some schools have it optional on their application.
10 pages.
Yes, 10 pages. And they were not a doctoral student, not a professor. Yeah.
There's a lot of career highlights and publications. I mean, you're really filling up a resume then. Okay, great. Now I hear some people were chatting and freaking out about the 2. If it goes on to 2 pages, it's okay, right? We're not saying hard stop at 1, but just focus on the important stuff. All right. So that's our resume. Excellent. You don't need your GPA or your LSAT on there. Those will be in other places. You don't need an objective, because everyone's objective is to be admitted to law school. So again, stick with the big stuff. And just final notes, sometimes it's optional. Most schools require a resume, but obviously check the requirements. And another hot topic, some controversy here. So final piece that we're going to touch on today is the explanatory essay, the addendum, the diversity statement. Different schools call it different things, but the general purpose is the same. Now you will remember that when we talked about the personal statement, I said, focus on your strengths, right? They want to walk away with all of the positive characteristics. Although a lot of us have had challenges or obstacles in the past. We might have a skeleton in our closet that we need to discuss. You have that tough conversation with people sometimes, and this is your chance to do so. So when there's a problem, there's an explanation, and you want to use this space to explain them. Now, before we talk tips on how to do it, I want to show you some example prompts, just like we did with the personal statement. If you read them really quickly, you will get the gist, which is essentially, hey, beyond the numbers, if there was anything that impacted your LSAT, your GPA, your academic performance over the years, please let us know. Now, let's talk tips. Aaron, when you talk to students, I'm sure this is a question, a regular question that you get, should I submit one? What's your general advice to students on how they should approach? Oh, wait, sorry, I skipped a slide.
I think explanatory essays are an important tool if there is something to explain, if that makes sense. As in, if you have done relatively well in college and have one semester that just tanked you, right? And that is explainable with some type of, right? Maybe there was something personal going on, something with family, something with mental health. That is an appropriate use of the explanatory essay because it allows you to explain a kind of a abnormal part of your application to show that that is abnormal from what you're usually capable of doing. And so it's a little circular. But my advice is, if there's something to explain, then I think it's important to explain. And people, right? I mean, and Cindy will tell you that the people reading these things really do understand, and that they're going to take it seriously, and that they're going to take it into account when they're reading your application.
Yeah, I agree. Now, the one that comes up is the one that I find comes up a lot is LSAT and GPA discrepancies. Cindy, how do you normally approach those? And when do you think is a good time for a student to write an explanation for their GPA or LSAT?
I would say in regards to GPA and LSAT, I would say look at the median scores of the schools that you're applying to. If a school has a median score of a 3.5 and you fall below 3.0, I would say submit an addendum for your explaining your GPA. If a school has an LSAT of a 155 and your LSAT is below that, I would say explain in regards to, or provide an addendum. I would say if you take multiple LSAT scores, if you have multiple LSAT scores within your application, go ahead and submit an addendum for that as well. We won't necessarily question if your scores increase, but we will question if you take 2 exams and the second exam is lower than the first one, then we'll sort of question like what exactly happened during that day. So those are some examples that I would more so likely would like to see an addendum for in those 2 cases.
Yeah, I agree. And the only thing I would add to that is just disclaimer, a big difference in LSAT scores, right? If you take it twice and you have a 160 and a 163, that makes sense, right? But if it's 10 points difference, you might want to explain what happened between those times. Also, the ones that I always think are compelling, if your GPA shows real irregularities, right? You can't write a explanatory essay if you're like, yeah, I have a 2.7 because I wasn't really into studying when I was in college. That's not going to be a great story. But if it's like, hey, my first year, my grades were really low, I moved away from home, there were some family health problems that I was dealing with, and then once I got past that, my GPA really ramped up, and you'll see that I got a 3.5 for my final 2 years in college. That can be a great story to have. So anything related to mental health issues, family health problems, living situation, any of those things, that they happen, right? And I want to say, for the most part, the people that I've talked to, they want to believe, they want to give you credit for those things, right? So obviously don't make up stories, but don't feel embarrassed to bring up personal issues here. But in general, you want to explain the problem, say why it's fixed and why it won't affect your performance in law school, right? It's okay to say, I had this problem, but you can't say, and, we'll see how law school goes, because it still might be an issue for me, because nobody wants to really hear that, right? Okay, great. And Aaron, talk to me, how long should this be? How, obviously personal statement, right? Craft it great, beautiful wording, all the rest of it. How should people think about writing the explanatory essay?
This is not the personal statement. This is not the time to show off your writing skills. It's not the time to, get into flowery language and everything. I don't think it should be any more than a page double-spaced. Very rarely, I think, would it need to be more than a page double-spaced, and maybe never, because your goal is to start the essay, state the problem, right? I had a low GPA my freshman spring or whatever. Bring the explanation. This is because, this family issue, this blah, 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 this blah, 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 whatever it is. And then explain, this is clearly not a problem anymore because look at my grades now, et cetera, and then get out, right? This is a very simple, almost mechanical essay where you are explaining the problem, explaining why it's not a problem anymore, and getting them to the rest of the other good parts of your application, right? You want them to read that and then toss it away and then get to your personal statement, your letters of rec, your resume, all that good stuff. So very, very simple essay, but has to be written very well, but it's a simple simple essay.
Yeah, I agree. And a page max. I mean, normally 2 paragraphs might be okay with this, right? But anything, really, I want to throw the doors wide open. Criminal history, drug and alcohol abuse, any of these things can, look, stuff happens, right? Skeleton in the closet, tell people it's fixed and you'll be good to go. Okay, I got a couple questions here. So one was related to LSAT score. Should we write it for just a big increase or also a big decrease? Any discrepancy, right? If it's, it's got to be more than 5 points. All right. Don't do it if it's, again, 160 and a 163. That's just a good day and a bad day. But if you have a 152 and a 165, they might want to know what the difference was there. What if you're a very great and brilliant candidate but hate entrance exams? This is always a hard one for me because I do have a lot of students who will say, look, I've always done really well in school, but my LSAT score, I don't think is indicative of how good of a candidate I'm going to be. I mean, honestly, Cindy, what do you think about that situation? And an addendum that says, you know, I'm not a great standardized test taker, but I've always excelled in school. Worth having an addendum there?
I would still submit an addendum. I would submit an addendum just explaining that particular situation, but also highlighting, you know, the factors that contribute to making that person an excellent, you know, student. So, you know, just, you don't want to leave any sort of areas that are unexplained. So, and leave it to the admissions committee to then interpret. So definitely, if you feel like you're a great student, highlight those skills briefly, just in one small paragraph, you know, and sort of explain why you feel like you struggle taking exams.
Yeah, I agree. Just be careful with the wording, right? Because obviously there's a lot of exams when you get to law school. So, oh no, go ahead.
Sorry, I did want to also answer, there was a question about providing an addendum if you've been out of school for a while. I would still provide the addendum, just again, explaining the skills that you feel you have acquired as a student and how you've grown, how, you know, 10 years ago, you were one person in school versus now how your sort of way of being has changed. So I would still provide that explanation. Admissions committee will go back to your transcripts and see right away when you've graduated, but still sort of explain the positive skills that you've acquired since then.
Last note on this, I have seen people talking about LSAT scores. There is a lot of weight given to the highest LSAT score, so don't worry so much about multiple scores these days. That's a policy that's changed pretty dramatically over the last 10 years or so. All right. So last question, just quick thing. We're running out of time. I've got to get to our special offer for today for our attendees, but I will ask Aaron and Cindy, we'll all stick around. Other questions, we'll sit around, have a glass of wine, talk law school admissions for as long as you guys would like. So don't worry, we'll try to get to all the questions that we can. So let's discuss last thing on admissions. I mentioned this before, the Credential assembly service. In my view, this is a good investment. It makes the whole process way easier. It's a little bit expensive. LSAC does offer fee waivers. So if you are in a situation where you've received financial aid or economically disadvantaged, please look into that. But the Credential assembly service is a great place to start to just organize everything. You upload everything to LSAC and they'll take care of your application. All right. Now, I did want to take a few minutes and talk about the LSAT. All right. Now, you will know I skipped over the LSAT and I love the LSAT. I've been doing the LSAT for a really long time. I did see somebody wanted to know my score, which I feel it's a very personal thing to reveal. Just kidding. Here's my story, and hopefully everybody can take this for motivation. I took the LSAT right when I was wrapping up undergrad. My first practice exam was in the low 150s. I ended up scoring a 179 on the LSAT through practice and study, and really committing to a lot of study there. Just applied myself to it and really saw a big score increase. So that is certainly possible. Now, we've been talking about all the different components of your application, but it does go without saying that your LSAT score is a really important part of that application, and it opens a lot of doors, both in terms of admissions, scholarship money, and all the rest of it. Little changes in your score can make a dramatic change in your chances of admission. So you can see here, 151 is the average score. You bump that up 12 points to a 163. Now you're in the 90th percentile. So every little point, right? So when Cindy's talking about that median score shifting 2 or 3 points, that's a lot of, in terms of the percentile chart, it's a big change. And 163, you go to 172, that's 9 points. And now all of a sudden you're in the 99th percentile. And all of these dramatically impact your chances of admissions at these schools, okay? So I don't want to leave you without pounding the point home, because I have been teaching students this for 16 and a half years. You got to maximize that LSAT, okay? Lots of chances to do it. Study. It's a very masterable test, which is the nice thing. If you want to, one more nice piece of advice, here's what I always tell people at the LSAT. It's the only standardized test where you really don't need to know anything to do well. It is a skills-based test. They're not testing content. It's not trigonometry. It's not organic chemistry. It's logical reasoning. It's critical thinking. It's breaking down logic puzzles, all kinds of things like that. All right. Now, of course, if you are gearing up for the LSAT and you want to study with the best, it is my duty to inform you that we are the best. So Blueprint, it has been helping LSAT students for over 16 years. We've helped over 100,000 students over the years prepare for and increase their LSAT scores. We boast the highest average score increase around. It's 11 points, which, as you just saw, makes a really dramatic difference. And the really incredible special thing for this audience and everyone this year, and why I'm so energized about what we're doing with students, is about a month ago, we launched our brand new and improved LSAT courses, and they are amazing. The feedback has just been awesome. We really took all the learnings of working with students over the years and helping them improve their scores and said, let's take this to the next level, the online learning environment, what students are demanding now. And these are just a few screenshots, but it's a beautiful interface. It's an engaging experience. I can't wait to see the results that we're driving for students. So just really proud of the team and excited to work with students there. The course, if you're interested in studying with Blueprint, comes in 2 different formats. There is our self-paced course, and the self-paced course is amazing. So it's based on learning modules that take you through lectures with very frequent assessments. They're interactive. We get like Hollywood's finest to produce these things for us. It's really beautiful. We personalize the study schedule for you. It really takes you from, I know nothing about the LSAT, to rocking this thing before test day. And also super excited, our live course, if you want the ultimate in LSAT prep, we really rethought the model of what live online learning could look like. I know a lot of you out there, and I know I experienced what live online learning could look like last year, and it wasn't always great, but we didn't want to settle for that. So we innovated on a new model for what live online could look like. So think of it like this. If you invest in a live online course, a lot of times what they did is they just took the classroom experience and put it online, but you're not leveraging any of the capabilities of the internet, right? So what we did is we made it where we're streaming live courses with our amazing team of instructors all the time, and you build your own live schedule. So it's the ultimate accountability, the community, the engagement, the access to our great instructors, plus the flexibility that you should demand from an online service, just like the other online services that you're using. So again, really awesome experience. I see some students in the chat who are in the classes. Really happy that you're enjoying the experience, and we will just continue to push. I know you're in very good hands. There's some of our instructors right there. And stop sharing. And there we are with Aaron and Cindy. Ooh, thank you both. That was fun, huh? Okay, I'm going to open the Q&A and see. Aaron, were you going through the Q&A? Any questions in here that we didn't?
Yeah, I was going through a few when I could.
Let me skim through and see if there's anything we didn't touch on. Will there be more Blueprint courses offered for the October LSAT? Yes, lots of them. October LSATs. The big tests this year are going to be August, October, and November, and we will be preparing lots of students. Is tutoring separate from self-paced and live online? Yes, we have tutoring packages where you can work one-on-one with an instructor, and the tutoring packages actually come with the self-paced course, so it's kind of both of best of both worlds. Excuse me, a lot of talking. I'm curious how political affiliation can affect law school admissions. Cindy, correct me if I'm wrong, but law schools strive for a diversity of views, right? They want lively conversation in class. So I certainly wouldn't think that you have to hide that or shy away from that fact.
That's correct.
Yeah, right. and believe it or not, the legal profession from time to time can be political. So I think it's great to put on. If you work for the Democrats, if you work for the Republicans, Libertarians, leave it on your resume. That's totally fine.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. A lot of questions about who to get letters of recommendation from. I think we touched on those. Senior year grades and personal statement.
A question about, I'm not sure if you were getting to it, the personal statement and the prompts.
Go ahead. I didn't see that one.
So there was a question about law schools repeating prompts for personal statements. Every year they have the same sort of prompt for their personal statements. So you can, go onto their website, kind of look at their application requirements, read their personal statement, and start crafting your personal statement now. And by the time that the upcoming cycle opens up, you can feel free to submit your personal statement in that way.
Awesome. Okay, great. Well, last plug, I want to say, check out Blueprint. We have great courses and admission services. But also, if we tried to get to as many questions as we possibly could today, admissions, the whole process, all people always have lots of questions, which is understandable. Hopefully we answered a lot of them, but if you have any other questions, please use Blueprint as a resource. Our student success team is amazing. They have helped lots and lots of students through the process, so feel free to chat or give them a call and we can talk you through the LSAT applications and everything else. So with that, Aaron, I want to say thank you. Cindy, thank you so much for all of your useful information. Have a great evening, everyone, and best of luck in the future.